Mountain Zimmer, this is Gemara Yevamos Daf Sadi Aleph. All the learning for one last day has been generously sponsored as an incredible schosser for Shlema v'chadvalei b'saradina, who Baruch Hashem is still recovering, needs many more tefillos and yeshuas. But v'siyata d'shmaya, learning the entire chabura should bring chadvalei b'saradina a complete refuah shlema b'karev, as well as chashudim zalchem and devar tamziv as arach shalom levizava even medali shem edchayev l'mitzvah asinu malka, as well as chos for shlema shal yosem revei shmom antilam taltzim mechlas and chom basviva Sarah Bluma bas Mendel Chaim Yeshua ben Malka v'shavei Shirchana b'Yitzayich Sha'ar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on Sadi Aleph Amid Aleph. We are 5 lines from the top, and we begin today as we ended yesterday, the last year I should say, with many of the small details, no detail is small, but many of the small dinim and details that the Mishnah concluded with within this case, in which we have someone that their husband went overseas. What happened? They receive a report, whether it was 1 aid, whether it was 2 aidim, we'll continue discussing today, that their husband was nifter. She goes and she remarries, and lo and behold, the first husband appears. So Teitze Mizeh Mizeh, she has to get divorced from both of them. In the case of the Reisha, when there was only 1 aid and Bezdin Paskin, she can get remarried, and all the other dinim. And the Mishnah continued, and the Mishnah said, Bas Koyin minat Truma. If she was a Bas Koyin, she grew up eating Truma. Now she is puzzled from eating Truma. Explains the Gemara, not only regular Truma, but even Truma derabbanan, she is not allowed to eat. And this is a chiddush. The chiddush being that you would have thought, as Rashi points out in the last wide line, Dilu b'Truma daraisa, you don't have to tell me that. That's pashit. The chiddush here is that you would have thought it was a level of highness. It was a level that she couldn't have avoided it, which you're going to see more about today. So maybe Truma derabbanan she could eat. Says the Gemara, no. Continues, vein yarshin shalzav and yarshin shalzav yarshik ksubas, and either yarshim inherit the ksuba. Asks the Gemara, ksuba my avidite. What is ksuba? What are you talking about? The Mishnah said she gets no ksuba. Now you're telling me no one inherits the ksuba. If she gets no ksuba, of course no one inherits the ksuba. Amar abba ksubas benin dechrin. You know what we're talking about? Talking about the ksuba, the tenai, the stipulation of the ksuba for the benin dechrin, for the male children, as Rashi quotes to us, the Gemara that we'll see in ksubas in a few months. Ksubas benin dechrin da'avil chiminai inun yartin kesef ksuba isi yoiser al chulkayin. This is the lashon of the ksuba, that if they're going to be male children, they're going to be taking the ksuba of their mother. So the Gemara points out that no, they do not get it. And now the Gemara explains, Pshita, what's the chiddush? Of course, like there's no ksuba, there's no tanai ksuba, and the kids don't get anything. Explains the Gemara, I would have thought, Ledida, for herself, the Avda Isura. She was over an Isser. Yes, it was unavoidable. Yes, she couldn't have done anything about it. But at the end of the day, she was a married woman. They got remarried. So says the Gemara, you would have thought perhaps that since she was the one that did the Isser, Kansua Rabbanan, the Rabbanan can ask her. But Lizara, for her kids, like Kansua Rabbanan, you would think they did not, the Rabbanan never can ask the kids, as they did nothing wrong. Kamash Mulan, that's the Chiddush, and even they do not receive the Ksuba. And the Gemara continues, and what happens if they die without any children? Does Yibum apply? The answer is no. The brothers of both the first and second husband, what do they have to do? Chalitza and not Ibum. Explains the Gemara. The first brother, the first marriage was a real marriage. So there's a din Chalitza midaraisa v'lo miyabim midrabanan. Midrabanan, they said, don't do Ibum. Why not? Because of this whole mess. The second marriage was not really a marriage, it was really znos. So they require chalitza midrabanan, and of course, lo miyam lo deraisa midrabanan yibum will not apply neither on a deraisa nor on a derabanan level. The Gemara continued, the Mishnah continued with 3 Tanaim who discussed what is the din of the Tanakhama, who argued the Tanakhama in the Mishnah. And each one had a slightly different wording in the level of Kula and Chumrah. Says the Gemara, quoting the first opinion of Yosi Omer Ksubas al Nichsei by the Rav, 15 lines down, the two dots. Yosi says the Ksuba was on the first husband, then we had Rav Eliezer, and then we had Rav Shimon. Rav Eliezer dealt with the mitzia, the finding and the earnings of the wife, and Rav Shimon dealt with the isser of the bia of the wife, the new husband, or either of them to the wife. So the Gemara now explains, as always, we have three Tanaim in the Mishnah, each one almost introducing a different din. So are they arguing? Are they agreeing? Do some argue? Do some agree? Each one talks about a different point. Rav Yossi talks about the ksuba. Again, Rav Eliezer talks about the mitzia, her findings and her earnings. And then Rav Shimon talks about their inability to live together. So explains the Gemara, we have two ways of learning, as we're going to see. We have Rav Huna and Rav Yochanan. We begin with Rav Huna. Amar Rav Huna basroi moidele kamoi. The latter opinion to the Mishnah, Rav Shimon, Rav Eliezer, Rav Yossi. Again, we have Rav Yossi first, Rav Eliezer second, Rav Shimon last. So says Rav Huna basroi, Rav Shimon is moidele to Rav Eliezer, Rav Eliezer is moidele to Rav Yossi, but Rav Yossi holds of neither. Explains the Gemara, kamoi loy moidele basroi. So when you go from the third to the second to the first, they hold of each other. When you go downward, they do not. Explains the Gemara. Rav Shimon, who again was opinion number 3, Modular of the Eliezer, the Mabi of the Iker Isura Leikanis, Rav Shimon holds that even on Bia, even on Tashmish, does not Aser, there is no Kinas. Kol Shekain, certainly what was Rav Eliezer's din? The din of Mitzio, Maisio Del, because that's only a din Memaina. For Rav Elazar, but Rav Elazar was the second day in Lo Maidile the Rav Shimon, but it doesn't continue. Rav Elazar doesn't know the Rav Shimon because Mitzia might say that Mainu Loikanis. Avol be Yisuru Kanis. Let's just explain this din and then the rest of them will flow. Again, we have Rav Yossi, Rav Elazar, and Rav Shimon. So the Gemara is saying that Rav Shimon holds the Rav Elazar, but Rav Elazar doesn't hold the Rav Shimon. It goes up, it doesn't go down. And then each opinion is going to be the same. So Rav Shimon, who allowed Tashmish, who allowed Bia, that even in the level of Isser, there was no Kanas, he certainly will hold off Rav Eliezer, who's not talking about Isser. What's he referring to? He's referring to money, Mitzia Maisiyah Del. But Rav Eliezer, who's referring to money, will not hold of Rav Shimon, who's talking about Isser. Now this is going to be the same din repeating itself. The Tarvayu Modu Rav Yossi, and they both agree to Rav Yossi's din. Hani the Yasser Tutei Loikanis. This one that they're living now does not have a Kanas. Certainly by the Ksuba, which whole entity, the purpose of the Ksuba is at the point of divorce. For Rav Yossi, who's the first opinion, doesn't know the other two opinions. Why not? Ksuba, Rav Yossi says the Ksuba she gets. Ksuba she gets from the first husband. And again, if we didn't explain well enough, all three opinions are arguing on the Tanakama, arguing the first part of today's year, the first 5 minutes we were discussing that there's no Ksuba, the kids don't get anything. That was the Tanakama. Rav Yossi, Rav Eliezer, Rav Shimon, all are arguing at some level. They're saying, no, there is something. Rav Yossi says the first husband's estate pays the Ksuba. So explains the Gemara of Yossi's din is daf on Ksuba, not another dinim. Avalahani, the other two dinim, Rav Eliezer and Rav Shimon, the Yassi today, Kanis, they make the Knas. That is Rav Huna. Rav Yochanan are the exact opposite. Kamoi moidele bratzroi. The first opinions hold of the latter opinions. Rav Yossi is going to hold the Rav Eliezer of Rav Shimon. Rav Eliezer will hold the Rav Shimon. But Basroi lo moidele kamoi. Rav Shimon will not hold the Rav Eliezer. Rav Eliezer will not hold the Rav Yossi. It now explains the Gemara. Rav Yossi, mother Rav Elazar, Rav Yossi, Rav Elazar. Why? Ksuba dimidi deila duda. The ksuba which is going from him to her, like kanas is no kanas. The kol shkein mitziyah ma'isiyah dat demidad lidei. Certainly, when it comes to her own earnings, which is coming from her to him, there will be no kanas. Rav Elazar's opinion number 2. Lo ma'idei to Rav Yossi. Why not? Cause mitziyah ma'isiyah dat demidida lidei. Only those two entities that come from her to him, like Kanis. Avol ksuba dimididei ledida, but the ksuba which comes from him, Kanis, there would be a kanas. V'tarvayu on both opinions, Modulay the Rav Shimon, they both hold the Rav Shimon. The third opinion, the Mishnah. Why? Mahani demechayim loikansi. These, while they were alive, there is no kanas. The bia of the brother in the situation of Yibam or Chalitza. Delachar mitzah lo kol shekain. But Rav Shimon Modulay laho. Why? Biudachar mitzah lo kanas avanu demechayim. Kanis. And that's the two ways of learning the Mishnah of Huna and Rav Yochanan in learning these three opinions, Rav Yossi, Rav Elazar, and Rav Shimon, who who argue on the Tanakama, how far, we call it, does the machlekes go? Continues the Gemara, about 10 lines, to the medium-sized lines, there's the 2 dots. Niseis shaloi bershos. Rav Shimon continued, and Rav Shimon said that what happens, she got married without rishos. And as we explained already, what does it mean without rishos? It means it's not the scenario of the Tanakama, which was what? Which was an Eid Echad, in which Bezdin allowed her to be married. Shaloi b'rishos means there were 2 Eidim. 2 Eidim came along and said your husband died. So she didn't need to go to Bezdin. That case is going to be different. And ironically, as we pointed out already, this case might be worse for her, even though there are 2 Eidim, but there's no psak, better for her, because there was no psak Bezdin, therefore she's allowed to return back to her first husband. Let's learn the Gemara. Amar Ravuna Amar Rav, Hachi Elchasa. This is the halacha. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman to Ravuna, Kanva Ganuvi Lamilach. You're a ganif. What are you doing? Rav Shimon, meaning Rav Nachman says back to Rav Huna, Marav, you're passing like this part of the Mishnah. But who do you hold like? If you hold like Rav Shimon, who's the one that said this memra, Eim halach Rav Shimon. So tell us, halach Rav Shimon. Tishmaitzach Rav Shimon Klausla. Because what you just said, that that's like Rav Shimon. And maybe you'll tell me, you know why you didn't say halach like Rav Shimon? Because halach Rav Shimon mashma filu become ma'isa. That would infer all the cases of Rav Shimon, like Rav Shimon that we just spoke about 2 minutes ago, about the brother doing giba. So says the Gemara, says Rav Nachman, what's the big deal? Ey malach Rav Shimon be'achrona. Say halach like Rav Shimon in the last case. And indeed, the Gemara folds, and the Gemara says kasha. That is indeed a kasha, as we always point out. It's very different than tiyufta that we'll have in a few minutes. Tiyufta means there are no terutzim. Kasha means there are. Amar Rav Sheshes, says Rav Sheshes, arguing on Rav Huna. Rav Huna paskin that like Rav Shimon. Rav Huna paskin that in this case, when there were 2 Eidim, and that's why she remarried, she's allowed to go back to the first husband. Says Rav Sheshes, Amina kinayim v'shachav Rav Amr la l'shmaitza. Rav was dozing off when he said what you just said. It's not accurate. Halacha. Why? Because you, Rav Huna Marav, just told me, Hachi Elchasa. This is the halacha. What does that infer? Mechlal de bligi. That sounds like there are those that argue on Rav Shimon, whom the Chachamim. Ma'avleilam nevad. But how could they argue in Rav Shimon? What else could she have done? She had 2 Eidim telling her that her husband is dead. What do you want from her? Mi'anis a'onsa. It's like a case of an unavoidable situation. Now this line of Ma'avalei lemevat, Ma'anis a'nosa, we're going to deal with it on Amud extensively. Is that a valid taina or not? Meaning, she's sitting here and saying, what do you want from me? There were 2 Eidim that came and gave Eidos. Meaning, in the first part of the Mishnah, which we've been speaking about the past few days, took us through Matan Torah. What was the first part of the Mishnah? First part of the Mishnah, there was 1 Eid. And it's true there was a Psak Bezdin, but it was because of 1 Eid. And we spoke about the fact she should have looked into him more. She shouldn't just have listened. But here we have 2 Eid, and we know that in the Torah, 2 Eidim have absolute believability and credibility. So what do you want from her? Mianis Hanasa, says Rav Shimon, says Rav Sheshes, excuse me. And therefore, why would the Rabbanan argue on Rav Shimon? So you're telling me, Hachi Elchasa like Rav Shimon, seemingly everyone should concur. Void, and furthermore, Rav Sheshes says, Tani, we learned in our Braisa. Kol harayi shabat Torah ein tzricha imenu. Again, in the first medium-sized line, Chutz meish as ish, and this is Al pi bezdin. Al pi bezdin hu debaya get. The obvious implication: if you have an ish that gets married via bezdin, that's when. And the other husband comes back, that's when you'll need a get, which is like the ratio of the Mishnah. Edim lo baya get, but via Edim you're not going to need a get. Now this Braisa, that's teaching us that when Edim gave testimony and she remarried, she does not need a get money. Whose opinion is this? 6 lines to the bottom. Elema Rav Shimon, I'll be Bezdin mi baya get. Really? If Bezdin Paskin, does Rav Shimon concur to the Tanakama? Of course not. But Tani Rav Shimon, I'm Rasu Bezdin Kairasi Kazadin Ish Beisha Kazadain. ish b'isha. So it says that Rav Shimon, he disagrees. Al pi eidim, when there were eidim that testified, kishigas ish b'isha. So what do we see? ID v'ID loy by a get. Rav Shimon holds in both cases the ratio, the seifa, 2 eidim, 1 eidim, you don't need a get. So this price it can't be Rav Shimon. Elalav, it must be the Rabbanon. And what do we see? We see the Rabbanon do not argue on Rav Shimon. We see the Rabbanon are in agreement that when there are 2 eidim testifying that the husband is dead and she remarries, my hava leila mevad. What do you want from her? She did nothing wrong, and therefore she would allow to go back to the first husband. Answers the Gemara, no. And therefore the question is, on Rav Huna Maraf, you said, so you were sleeping. It sounds like you're holding this is specifically Rav Shimon. It's not true. Everyone would concur. Answers the Gemara, no, Rav Shimon, he really is Rav Shimon. And explain it as follows, Rav Shimon also, Amar, Oimer, Oise Bezdin Karas Kavanas Isha, Ish Be'isha, Ubaya Get, Al Pi Eidim, Kishaloi Kavanas Isha, Ish Ve'loi Baya Get. So we're explaining that Rav Shimon really only holds of his din when it's 2 Eidim, not when it's 1 Eid. And therefore, we don't have a raya necessarily that the Rabbanan will concur with him by 2 eidim, and therefore the Gemara deflects the question on Rav Huna Marav, Rav Shishis is kasha, because we could assume that in reality the Chachamim would argue on Rav Shimon. Answer number 1. Rav Ashi Amar comes along Rav Ashi with another teretz. How we can explain the Brisa according to Rav Shimon, the Indian Isura Katani. The Brisa is referring to the level of Isser. It's not talking about Gat, Vachi Kamar. Asu Bezdin Kairas, by Rasit Kizadin Isha, Ish Bisha, Misra Bailan, she's also, I'll be Aidin Kirjas Ish Bish, Veloy Misra Baila. So another way of explaining how that Brisa could actually indeed fit with the opinion of Rav Shimon. Ravina Amar, as you turn over to Amabeis, another way to defend Rav Huna Marav. Leaning carbon katani, because again, the old question of Rav Huna Maraf, when he said Alchi Elchasa like Rav Shimon, that when 2 eidim come, she's allowed to go back to the first husband. The kasha was that Alchi Elchasa sounds like it's a specific and unique halacha of Rav Shimon. The kasha of Rav Shishis was we have a brisa that seemingly shows us that the Rabbanan would concur. So each teretz now is showing that brisa is not true. That brisa could be Rav Shimon. So first teretz, the second teretz was the brisa was talking about Isser. The third teretz, Ravina, is that the brisa is talking about carbon. Explains the Gemara. So bezin v'raski is on the ish v'esh v'lo ma'isi carbon. I'll be eating shiga ish v'esh ma'isi carbon. So 3 different ways of reconciling that the brisa could indeed be Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara. Now we have a different, so the first 3 answers of Rav Huna Marav were taking the Brisa and showing it could be Rav Shimon. Once we show the Brisa is Rav Shimon, now we have no reason to assume that the Rabbanan are in agreement with Rav Shimon, and in reality the Rabbanan could disagree. And then Rav Huna Marav was accurate and correct by saying like Rav Shimon, and that the Rabbanan would not necessarily agree. But Viba Yisema says the Gemara another way of reconciling the kasha of Rav Ashi, Hakamaisa Rabbanan. He says the Gemara, we can explain that in the first case, we can explain the Brisa is the Rabbanan. V'taritz halchi. Explain it as follows. Chutz meisha is v'shenisis al pi bezdin. Except the meishis or when they're married until bezdin. So 4 ways of explaining the Brisa. Now says the Gemara, let's go back. Fundamentally, what was the reason why Rav Shishis held that the Rabbanan should agree with Rav Shimon? Because the case of Rav Shimon is there are 2 eidim saying to this woman her husband died. And Rav Shimon's big question was, "My Havaleila Mevad." Anasa ansa. What more could she have done? There are 2 eidim that said her husband died, so she listened to the eidim. Why are we faulting her for listening to the eidim? So Masiv Ula asks Ula on that premise, on this idea of my Havaleila Mevat. This is going to be really almost for the duration of today. We're going to bring countless rayos of cases in halacha in which it seems that the person was up against the wall. He had no way to avoid the story, and yet we do hold him accountable. If there is a story in which one is picked in a corner and we're holding him accountable, that shows us the svara of my Havaleila Mevad is not accurate. Those are going to be all the kashas. So we begin with with Ula, 6 lines from the top of Sadi Aleph on the base that asks, "My Avalela Meva," do we say? But now we learned in the Mishnah. Again, as if there's a get that is written, and of course, all these cases are going to be from throughout Shas. We're not necessarily going to be able to delve into them in their entirety. Mirz Hashem will get there as we go. So this is a Gemara in Gittin. Says the Gemara in Gittin, if they wrote the get for a certain kingdom, which is not proper, for a mother, Yavan, the Binyan Abayis, the Chorban Abayis, they wrote the get for the amount of years of the Beis HaMikdash, or they messed up that they wrote it in the wrong place, but because of mitzvahs. What's the halach if a woman has such a get that's found to be invalid and she already remarried? She has to get divorced from both husbands. Ask the Gemara Bamai, what's the problem? We should say to this girl, what do you want? This girl can say, I have a get. I got a get. What? I'm supposed to know the intricacies of law, how to read a get? So why are we faulting her? Explains the Gemara, she should have read the get. She should have went to an expert, a mumcha, rav, a dayan. A bezdin, you always check. Never saw in the dotted line without reading. She should have read the get, so we hold her accountable. Next case. Amar Rav Stephen Rashi Tashma, I'll bring you another raya. Hakoni says Yevimta, someone who gets married to Yevama. And the co-wife goes, Vinis says and gets remarried to someone else. Vinis says you islandess, and it comes out that the first one was an islandess. If it's an islandess, as we've learned extensively, that means she can't have children. That means what? That means the Yibam was invalid. So what's the halacha? They both have to get divorced and everything applies to them. Ask the Gemara about why? What did the tzara, what did the co-wife do wrong? Name him, I have a what should she have done? The co-wife went and did Yibam. Says the Gemara, no. She should have waited, she should have figured out to find out if indeed the co-wife was an islandess or not. Amar Rabbi, another kasha, about 15 lines down. The first one line is Amar. All the rais that we said that it patters up the co-wives, all chutzaras v'nitzaf, one of the co-wives goes and gets married, and it comes out that you had a tour. This is like the tour that we learned all the way back 3 months ago in Daf Beis, that when there is an ereva, when one falls to Yibam and the relationship with one of the wives is a form of an ereva, it automatically voids the Yibam. So that's what happened over here. But then you know what happened? The one that was an ereva, the one that was a relation to the Yavam was an islandess. Meaning, there was no Yibam in that story. Meaning, the co-wife should have done Yibam. What's halacha? Ask the Gemara about my name. Why don't we say, what could she have done? Says the Gemara, the same answer. She should have waited to ensure that indeed the co-wife was not an islandess. Amar Rav, another kash, I think we're up to number 4. Tashima kosav sefer get leish. The Sefer, the scribe, wrote a get to the man, v'shever leish, and the receipt to the woman. V'tan, he made a mistake, and they got the wrong document. Husband thinks he's giving his wife a get, he really gave her a receipt. The wife thinks she's getting the get, and the opposite occurs. And one day the husband goes, ex-husband, pulls out his drawer to read the get, and lo and behold, it's not a get. Lo and behold, he's holding the get. He's supposed to have the receipt. He has the get, and the wife goes, she goes to find her again, and what does she have? She has a receipt. What's the halacha? And they remarried in the interim. Lacha is they have to get divorced. What do you want from them? Says the Gemara, no. Again, you should have read the get before you went and got remarried. Amar Ravashi, another 5th kasha tashma. Shina, Shemai, Ushma, Shemirai, V'Shemira. There was a problem within the writing. The names were wrong. The cities were wrong. Ask the Gemara, again, he probably really get to should have written it. Amar Ravina, 6th kasha tashma. Konsa begat Kaireach. Someone got remarried with a bald get. A bald get is a get. Basically, for Kahanim, they would write a get. The way that they did it was they'd write a line, they fold it up, and then they would sign it. They write another line, fold it up and sign it, another line, fold it up and sign it. The reason why they did this was that a kohen who's not able to get remarried after getting divorced, it would take extra time. That'd be a minimum of 3 folds and 3 eidim. And then what happens if, lo and behold, one of the folds doesn't have an aid? It's possible. So someone had such a get, and she got remarried, and lo and behold, the get was possible because it was kireach. It was a bald get, kireach. So says the Gemara over there, ask the Gemara, why? The no thing they could have done. Again, they should have read them. So after 6 different questions trying to ask on the Svara Mayav Mevad, the Gemara deflects all. The Gemara says, no, there is what you could have done. You should have looked into it. You should have ensured. You should have ascertained the details and read the get. And if not, it is your fault. We're going to stop over here. We're going to pick up tomorrow with the Svara of Rav Papa, continuing within, do we rely on this idea of Mayav Mevad in certain scenarios? We'll pick it up from here tomorrow.